Good morning, and great to be here. And a great person to introduce to you, Renee Gordon. Now, I'm going to read you, and I think it's going to come up in the PowerPoint, but you need to know what she's up to because she's up to a lot. She is an attorney with the U.S. Small Business Administration. She's currently on the board of directors of the League of People with Disabilities in Baltimore, Maryland. Previously served on the board of the Chimes, an organization located in Baltimore that serves the disabled, and Families Together, an organization located in Moscow, Idaho, that serves families with autistic children. And as we started to talk about before we were introduced, I wanted to find out from you what does the Small Business Administration administer?
Oh, yes, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is one of my passions, and so I'm delighted to be here. And actually, the Small Business Administration, known as the SBA, actually makes loans to small businesses. And I actually ended up there. I had worked before in Baltimore, and after taking time off, about 6 years, it was time for me to get out of the house. And Alex was in school, and it was time for me to reclaim part of my existence that didn't include autism. And so I found a job with the government, and I work with the Small Business Administration, making loans to small businesses and helping people who want to start a small business. They can go to the SBA. We have district offices all over the United States, and the government will guarantee a loan for them, and they can start a small business. One of the most famous small businesses that was started with an SBA loan is Chobani Yogurt, so to give you an idea. So, and I've been with them for 15 years.
I think what's interesting is you have your own identity, your own source of inspiration. And I've always felt with a lot of children on the spectrum that parents become too absorbed in their own child. They don't seem to know how to draw their child into their life. One of the reasons is they may have given up their life for their child. So there's nothing to draw the child into. You have so much, and that's part of Alex's personality. He's seen you reach out, do these different activities, and he will copy you. It's a wonderful gift for your child. Now, what I'm interested in is I have to go back and look at my notes of what I made on these PowerPoints. I want to know, did you join the small businesses before you had Alex?
No.
Or was it?
Alex actually had been diagnosed, and I had spent 6 years at home working with Alex. We had an ABA program in the house. And he was in school. He was in a non-public school. And it was really time for me to reclaim a part of my identity. So much of my identity had been wrapped up in Alex and in working with him in the ABA program and in activities that were related to autism. And as you know, there is a profound sense of isolation.
Yes.
Working with a child with autism. And unlike children from normally developing families, you're not dealing with parents of friends of your child. And so it was time for me to do something that was fulfilling for me, that was part of my identity, where I could gain some sense of accomplishment that was not tied to autism.
Oh, that's key. See, one of the things that I'm more and more looking at is we put autism off to one side, sort of them, us and them. We're forgetting the fact that how we connect to each other, what's happening between us. And that's what you're talking about. It's not only your own identity, which you had to go back and claim, which many parents, I find, have lost, but what's going on between you. I keep going back to this point of why are you and I able to talk to each other, even over this long distance, and understand each other, and our children can't? Because that's where identity goes off. The parents lose a sense of, if my child doesn't know who I am, who am I? The connection is what is not working. And you're an example of the fact that if you build your own identity, you will make a better connection to your child.
Yes.
I wanted to mention that you said you were a past participant of the Partners in Policy Making program, and that's something that is, we really recommend to parents to do that. What did you think about the program when you were?
The program was a godsend for me. It was an 8-month program, and we met once a month, and it started on a Friday afternoon and went to a Saturday afternoon. And it started with and it wasn't just for parents of disabled children, and it wasn't limited to just autism. It was for any disabilities, and it was also for self-advocates. So, and it started with a history of the disability movement. So we learned about eugenics, dealing way back in the early days of disabilities, and moved all the way up, went through the IEP process. We learned all about IDEA, and then also learned about what happens after school is over, and what, as a parent, you can be doing for your child when school ends, and what sort of arrangements you can be thinking about, you can be doing. And so it really covered the whole spectrum of disabilities, from the history, the policies that are now in place, how they got there, and then the practicalities of what you as a parent can do for your child.
So this is a national. This is a national program. So you would really recommend that parents find it in their state and go to this, because it is
absolutely
okay. I was hoping you'd say that, because a lot of people that I know were involved in it, and I do think it's a great program. So I'm glad we could do a little plug on that. Okay.
Well, that points to what it is I have in my mind. I see on my note there. Can you give us an example? You coached other parents, showed them how to advocate for their child. Like how? What did you do? Can you tell us a story?
First of all, I can tell you that the Partners in Policy Making taught me about IDEA, and it taught me what IDEA was all about. The Free and Appropriate Public Education, FAPE, and what all of that meant, and what an IEP was designed to achieve, so that every time I went in to an IEP meeting, I knew what was expected and how I could best advocate for my son.
Now, I think that's interesting. You were a lawyer at the time. Your husband, Dr. Barry Gordon, is a therapeutic cognitive neuroscience professor, but you still had to take this time out to learn about IDEA. Like, that wasn't part of your general knowledge in raising a child, that maybe your child's going to have some special needs and you're going to have to know this information. It's not like, what do you do when they get a cold, So you, as educated, highly educated people as you were, you still had to go back and learn all that information. I think that's amazing that that's not part of our...
Even highly educated people get colds.
Yeah. It's not part of the normal conversation of raising children. This is like... Yeah. And yet so many children are receiving services.
Yes, so many children are receiving services, and yet as you get diagnoses and as you start going through the process, nobody ever really tells you what you're entitled to. Alex was young. He was moved into an early intervention program. It was only through the Partners in Policymaking program that I learned about the federal government's role in early intervention and why that was mandated by the federal government. I had no idea when, Alex started at an early age and moved from early intervention to a non-public placement, that was governed by IDEA, and that the hallmark of IDEA is what's called FAPE, F-A-P-E, the free and appropriate being really the significant factor, public education.
Public education. Yes, Temple was educated privately. I was helped because this is back before there was any kind of organization. But there was a network, even long ago then. Temple was born in 1947 and diagnosed 2 years later in 1949. And the Children's Hospital recommended speech lessons. Now, the woman who taught speech had a little school in her basement. This is before Women's Lib. Today, she would be head of a big school. So what happened was my advice came, she was not only helping Temple to learn how to speak, she was teaching me what to do. So I got my instruction individually from a series of brilliant women who, because of Women's Lib, had to take much lesser positions, more inconspicuous positions than they would now. But I could not have raised Temple without them. They knew the field.
And I think that, that was the way it was before we had IDEA. And
Yes,
it's important to note that IDEA only became a law in the mid-'70s. And
I didn't realize it was that late.
Yes, and before then, a school district could deny a parent of a disabled child and say, I don't want to educate your child. And so there were a lot of these schools that grew up because of parents of disabled children wanting to have their child educated, but being denied by a school district. In 1964, we had the Civil Rights Act, but it wasn't until 1975 that we had a law that mandated that the disabled were entitled to a free, appropriate public education.
And that makes it even more incredible with Eustacia and what you did with Temple, Eustacia, because parents now, when they struggle, we say, okay, this is what your rights are. You had nothing. You just literally flew by the seat of your pants and did what you thought was right. And the number of people that were also on Temple's side that you pulled in is pretty amazing.
What also, and this was luck that it happened at the same time when Temple was thrown out of a private school in a cruel way. Just the headmaster's words are, "You are a menace to society. Don't come back after Christmas vacation." I think that's a pretty cruel statement to a little girl of 14. Fortunately, I'd been doing research for WGBH for a documentary that they were doing on children on the spectrum, who were then called distressed children. And I had visited all the special schools, and there were a lot of them in New England, from Maine down through Rhode Island. And I'd been impressed with them. I saw the kind of work they were doing. It was the beginning of understanding that somebody must help with these children. There would have to be a shared concern and a shared expertise. I picked out 3 schools at that time that I thought were tops. I thought, Temple, before we're going to do this, I said, we will do it tomorrow. It was Christmas vacation. I said, we will go to see 3 schools. I picked out 3. I thought all 3 of them are very, very good schools. I'd be okay with that. I said, well, we'll go, and Temple, you can pick the school you'd like to go to. because I wanted her to be part of her own destiny, to take hold of her own destiny. And she picked Hampshire Country School, where she did her high school work. And it took her 6 years to get through 4 years of high school. There were 3 in staff to every student there. There was a farm. There was another life. It had a lot of the things that you're talking about, Renee, that you found for Alex in the home that he's at. They combined these things long before anybody had really worked them out. And not only that, but the man who ran the school, he not only taught Temple, he taught me. And I used to go there all the time. And it made the transition so fast that I don't think Temple had time to fully take in the cruel way in which she'd been treated by the school that dismissed her. And the school could do that legally in those days.
And they can, and they could. And that is, one of my points, which is, Eustacia, nobody knows your child better than you do.
That's right.
Right. And nobody spends more time with your child than you do. And that you need to trust your instincts. And
I think sometimes you need a partnership. What I liked was I was able to talk to certain people so that they would hear my point of view, what I felt was important. And then they could tell me, in other sense, they guided and supported Temple. They guided and supported me. I needed them. I needed their help.
Yes,
so
and
you have to put the two things together. But you're right. You have to trust your own instincts.
You do, and every once in a while, along Alex's years in school, we would find somebody who had had the experience and could really help guide us. And then along the way, we would find people who were what I call newly minted, interested in the area and just out of school. But, their experience was limited. They were young. They really hadn't had a lot of hands-on experience with a child with autism, which is, my brushing story. This is where you have to trust your instincts, and making those partnerships with somebody who you trust, who knows your child, who has the experience, goes hand in hand with trusting your instincts. Because I remember when Alex was young, and he was nonverbal. He's still nonverbal. And I was told by a young, newly minted speech therapist, or perhaps it was an occupational therapist, that if I went out and I bought these corn silk brushes. I didn't know what a corn silk brush was. I was used to, you just unwrap the corn, and the corn silk, you just kind of use your hands and you undo the silk on the corn. But apparently there was something that was known as a corn silk brush, that you could brush the ear of corn and get the silk off. And that if I brushed Alex every 2 hours for 5 minutes, that would increase his chances of speaking. And so I go out to a local kitchen store and I buy a dozen corn silk brushes. Luckily, the woman at the counter was, some high school student, and she had no idea what I was doing, because anybody else buying a dozen corn silk brushes would have questioned, who's buying a dozen corn silk brushes? We had corn silk brushes all over the house, because you never knew when the 2 hours would be up and where Alex would be. And so then you'd take the corn silk brush out and you'd brush his arms, you'd brush his legs. You couldn't brush his stomach. That was for some reason not, a place to brush, and brush his back. And, we did that for many, many weeks. And of course there was no change. And then at some point I realized this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of and that I'm doing. Why am I doing this? And I threw the corn silk brushes away, and that was the end of it. And I realized, I need to trust my instincts. Brushing him with a corn silk brush is not going to increase his chances of speaking. And I needed to find my voice, which was asking, okay, what is the clinical basis for this? What are the research tests that have been done? Tell me. And so then I started questioning, and I found my voice. And so when I was told to do certain things, I would ask, tell me, what are the clinical trials that have been done? What is the success rate with this? And if nobody could give me those answers, then I knew this was a bunch of hogwash.
Yes.
Now, you said you had him in ABA, and that has limited research done on ABA as far as what that can do. What was your take on that as a parent? Because I know a lot of parents start out with that because they just don't know where else to go, and that's such a scripted program that you think, well, that's going to work. And it does appear to take care of some of the immediate issues you're having with your child. What was your take on ABA as a therapy?
I think what it did was provided a structure for learning.
Okay.
And so in terms of giving us a structure, a paradigm for teaching Alex, that is what it allowed us to do. So that if we wanted to teach Alex something, we used the ABA model. So we used it for toilet training. We used it and we've used it today for certain things. This sense of a positive reinforcer. So in terms of its clinical efficacy, I don't so much look at that, but I look at it more as a structure that he's able to learn something new.
So pretty much how you can use discrete trials to teach your child something quick, kind of a quick and dirty method. Okay, we really want to get this skill ingrained in him, and so we're going to implement a good, positive approach to do it.
That's a very important point to bring forward, because I find too many parents are literal about ABA. And yet when I talk to the teachers, she'll say, oh, well, I have other things that I do as well as the ABA. I have my own version of ABA. I thought, okay, the teachers decided to be flexible about it. But there are parents who are literal. It's the best word I can think of. They think they have to follow it. Absolutely. And I like your point to look at it as a way of structuring something.
Yes, it was a way that we could get through to Alex so that he could learn.
Yes.
And that was how we used it. Get in the habit of learning. Yes. Yes.
I think we've not taken note of the importance of establishing certain habits, behavior that you expect from him.
Yes, and just like a normal child.
Yes, well, that's true of all children. And it has to be consistent.
Yes.
So that he knows what to expect. And you know and he knows that you expect a certain action from him.
Absolutely.
That's a pattern for all children.
Yes. I think that, you have to recognize that a child with autism, it's going to take more time. It's going to take more effort. And many parents feel guilty. And they let the guilt come in. And so I'll let my child, behave in this way. Rather than
this brings up the crucial thing about accepting love or accepting behavior. To unconditional love means I love my child. Whatever happens, I love my child. People confuse it with accepting all behavior. That doesn't mean I'm going to accept behavior that I don't think is suitable. And that's not, and a lot of parents take that unconditionally and they allow their child. All I can think of is if you don't stake the tomato plant, the tomatoes will lie all over the ground and rot. And basically, a discipline is a stake that your child can grab hold of and learn to climb up like the plant.
That's so true because, you need to take a longer view, which is that your child will grow up, and your child will interact with a number of different people. While your child is young, your child may just be interacting with you, with the school, who knows how to deal with him or her. But as your child begins to age, adolescence, and then gets out of school, your child may be interacting with a whole group of different people. And your child needs to have a set of behaviors that are socially appropriate. And so for that reason, discipline is extremely important. And
children have their patterns. I remember Temple telling me, well, I have to play the games by the other kids' rules or they won't let me play with them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way you play the game. And that starts young. And then you have prepared Alex so that he can go and live where he's now living.
Eustacia, you said Temple knew that she had to play the games, and often they would let her play. And what we see now with so much information on autism is we would probably go to the other children. There would be an assumption we would go to the other children, explain to them that no, that she can't do this, and that they need to accommodate the fact that she can't play by the rules.
But then that's enabling. You're just enabling the child to and leaving them sprawling around on the ground.
So, Renee, how did you deal with people's what were your expectations of Alex that other people might have said, oh, well, you just can't, that's too much, and we all need to accommodate Alex, we need to be more understanding? Did you ask people to do that, or did you put it on Alex, or how did that work for you?
We chose two goals for Alex: socialization and meaningful communication. And the socialization was really behaving appropriately in public. And we really did not put this on other people. This was on Alex. This was, if you went out and we were in line someplace at a cashier, we taught him, it's not our turn yet. We have to wait. We never expected that somebody in a grocery store was going to let us go first because it was he was autistic. Or if we went to a restaurant, we didn't expect that we were going to be able to jump to the head of the line because he was autistic. He was taught, it's not your turn. And we taught him this concept of your turn, my turn, not your turn. And that's how we've dealt with him. Now, he is very low functioning. There's certain things out in the public that he just can't do. And so we don't take him to certain places that we know are going to cause
going to throw him off.
Going to absolutely throw him off. But there are certain things, he can go to a movie. He can go to see a play. He's very visual, so he goes to museums. He can go to restaurants. He does like to go bowling, and he goes to certain other events, and he understands waiting. He understands that it's not his turn, that he has to wait. When we go to a restaurant, he understands that it takes time after you choose what you want on the menu, that it's going to take time for food. Also, he can read, and he would choose things on a menu. And oftentimes, he would point to something on a menu, and we knew that wasn't what he wanted. It just happened to say chicken. I remember going to a Mexican restaurant with him, and he pointed to chicken flautas. Now, he didn't know what chicken flautas were. What he really wanted was a chicken quesadilla. Showed him chicken quesadilla. No, that wasn't what he wanted. He kept pointing to chicken flautas. So we got him chicken flautas. This concept of consequating the action, the behavior. And that's part of the discipline. This is what you chose. This is what you need to be eating for lunch. If this isn't what you want to eat, you're not going to be eating lunch. You're not going to die of starvation.
I remember saying that if you don't want lunch, fine, you can wait for dinner.
Yes. Yes, and it's what you would do with a normally developing child.
Yes, it is. And I think I'm trying to. I wanted to get to where I had when you said choose your battles. Like what? I'd love to hear a battle that was a battle for you. It comes after. Is this toward the end? We have jumped around a little bit there.
That's all right.
Chris, sorry about that, but it seemed so much to fit in with what Renee is saying right now that I wanted to hear more about. Give a story of a battle. What have you?
I've heard so much about. First of all, our children hear no so much, and they hear don't do that, and they need to hear, they need to have more control over what they're doing. And our children, a lot of them like to watch videos, and they like to watch, perhaps as they grow older, age inappropriate videos. They grow older, and Alex is still watching Barney. I hear stories of older children who are watching Walt Disney videos, and some parents believe that this is not appropriate. They should be watching age-appropriate videos. Well, choose your battles.
Like what? I mean, why? I find when I'm tired out, I think I would really just like to watch Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
I don't want to watch something serious and meaningful. I'm tired.
Yes. And so, it's choosing the battle. It's let them, enjoy. Give them some control over their environment. Give them some control over their decisions and what they want to do with their leisure time. If Alex wants to get on YouTube and watch Barney, we let him do that. It wasn't taking away from other activities. He didn't have homework that he needed to do. He wasn't going to college. He's not able to read books. So it wasn't taking away from something else, and it gave him a sense of empowerment in terms of having control.
Don't we all do that?
Yes. And, my story was always, people go on Friday night to a happy hour. And do we say that's wrong?
No.
Why is it wrong that he can sit in front of the TV and watch Barney?
That's his happy hour, yes.
Yes, exactly. And
are we more mature for doing that? Because the implication is, well, he's watching a child's program and we're doing a grown-up thing.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I don't think we are.
Yes. And, there was my stepson lives in New York. And there was a time when Thanksgiving we were going to go up to New York to spend Thanksgiving with my stepson in New York. And we had prepped Alex all November. It was on the calendar. He knew. Even the night before, he helped me pack his suitcase for New York. And then an hour before we were supposed to go, we give him a written schedule every morning. No, he doesn't want to go to New York. No New York. No Brett, his, brother. No. And so we decided we were taking the train. We couldn't take the chance of getting on a train with him because there's no way to punish him. That wouldn't be meaningful. There's no way to reason with him.
It has no meaning for him either. A punishment is supposedly in retribution for an understood deed.
Yes, and so
he doesn't understand the deed.
And so what we tried was, we'll drive up the next morning. We gave him a schedule for the next morning that had New York, and again he crossed it out. And it was, we had to finally resign ourselves to the fact that he had chosen not to go to New York. And with his behavior, there's no way to have a discussion as to why he didn't want to go to New York
and he doesn't know
to
why.
Discuss it. Yes. And so we just made the decision we would not go to New York that year for Thanksgiving. And so that was it. It was a situation where we had to choose our battle rather than make him go and have him stressed, and we would be
and
stressed.
you stressed. You see,
Yes.
there's a two-way
Yes.
street going on.
Yes.
It would
And
be
then,
simpler to stay home and have a little turkey at home.
And
then,
if you had taken him, what kind of behaviors might Alex do? Because I want to impress on people that you made this choice for a very valid reason. It wasn't like he was just going to sit and rock very hard in the chair for.
Oh no, had we taken him on the train, he could have had, at the time he was a grown man. He's 5'10", 5'11", 185 pounds. He could have really fought. He could have run, tried to escape. He could have done any one of a number of things. If we'd put him in the car, he could have tried to escape from the car, and it would have been hard to restrain him. So there's no telling what he could have done besides the screaming that he would have done. So he would have tried to, as they use the word, elope.
Yeah.
And
so giving him a choice at that point, he was it was because a lot of times he would go along with what you said. If you did all the preparation, he would do it. So there was some reason why he didn't want to go to New York, even though we don't know what it was.
Yes. And to this day, we have no idea.
We don't know.
No.
And he can't edit his feelings, which means he doesn't really know why.
And despite the preparation,
despite all the preparation, he didn't want to go there.
No. And, of course, there is also, when we did the due process hearing.
But that's what I have a big question mark by, what do you mean by due process? What happened?
Well, Alex was young, and he was in a non-public school, and the school had observation booths, and parents could come in and view the child, view the classroom, and the teacher didn't necessarily know that a parent was in the observation booth. And Alex's behaviors were not so egregious, and so he's very visual, and he was very happy. This was a classroom in Baltimore, and it overlooked a street, and he was very happy just standing at the window watching the cars go by. And on several occasions, I noticed that I would come into the observation room, and the teachers would be dealing with other children in the classroom who were more aggressive, while he was just standing at the window watching the cars go by. And I was angry. I was very angry. I felt this is not an appropriate education. By this time, I had gone through the Maryland Partners in Policy Making program, and so I knew he was entitled to a free and appropriate public education. This was not appropriate. Looking out the window was not appropriate. And so he was entitled to that, and he wasn't getting that. And so there is a whole administrative procedure that you can file to challenge the school district to provide an appropriate education. And we hired an attorney, and we went through the whole process, and Alex was given a one-on-one aid. In retrospect, Alex is now 23. At the time, he was perhaps 5 years old. Would I do it again? No. Would it have made it would have been better had I simply gone to the principal at the school and talked with her. Alex is up there looking out the window. Is there something we can do so that he's not looking out the window? I appreciate that, the other children in the classroom are a little bit more aggressive, and that there's a need to get them under control. And I think a lot of it was perhaps anger and disappointment that my child, my only child, is autistic, is nonverbal, never going to speak, and that it was my anger more than anything else. I don't know that having had the one-on-one aid improved Alex's education any more than not having the aid would have.
But
And
you also are a lawyer, and legal paths are what you work with. And what may have been in your mind, or what's in my mind as you say that, is what does the community, what do we deserve from the community for us children who are on the spectrum? What are the legal boundaries? In other words, we're into the community. We're first the school, first the family, then the school. Now, you're a lawyer. You deal with this in terms of the community. How do you think the path of responsibility should go?
And and that was the problem at that time.
I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
I didn't have the long view, because at that time I was so focused on his education, and I didn't see that education would end for him at 21, and that 21 would come in a snap, and that 2 more hours of speech therapy or having an aid would really make no difference when you took into account his overall lifespan, and that the community is really the largest part of his life. School is a very, very tiny segment. He would go to school for a certain number of hours during the day, but the rest of the time was spent at home. Weekends were with us.
When we're young, we don't. Young mothers, and when you and I were young, we didn't know that. I think it's one of the advantage points of age is you begin to see things in a much wider perspective.
Yes, and I see so many parents today who focus so much on the educational process and don't look ahead to what is going to happen when my child ages out of the educational system. And that is the crucial point. Because
and is it going to be suitable for him? Is this what will be he fulfilled in his terms?
So before we go there, I want to say that the one thing you did give Alex was a way to communicate. So can you talk a little bit, and technology, hooray, was on your side. Talk a little bit about how he uses his iPhone to communicate, because I want to get a clear picture of Alex, and this is a skill that he certainly wouldn't have had the opportunity to use or learn if he'd been born in 1950.
No, and we started.
It exists, yeah.
We started with the PEC system, and he was really good at the PEC system. And from there, what we did is we created.
And just for people that don't know, that's a picture system that you use. You point to the pictures in place of words.
And the picture exchange communication system.
Correct.
And they're little pictures, little cards, and he would hand those over. And what we did was we got, it was like a vinyl board with Velcro at the top, and then he would we Velcroed all these little pictures, and he would put those at the top of the board to let us know what he wanted. And then we figured out that he could read, and so we changed the pictures to words, and then he would Velcro the words at the top. And we kept evolving to the point, because we then found out that there was technology. He carried around his neck a big device that had words that he could, that they were actual words that he could press, and then press another key, and it was voice output. And then we downsized to something called a chat PC that could use either symbols, pictures, or for Alex, it was words. And you can type in the words. And today what he uses is an iPhone, because it has a special software program that, again, can be adapted. For him, he uses words, but it can be adapted for pictures or symbols. And he wears a lanyard around his neck so that it's always with him, so that he can always communicate. That's, I think, very important. We can always communicate, and so he needs to have the ability to always communicate. So he wears it around his neck, and he either types in the words. It also has a word predictor. So oftentimes he'll start typing and words will come up and he recognizes them. They come up as a bar at the top of the iPhone, and then when his sentence is complete, he presses that bar at the top and there's a voice output device that will communicate for him. And so in that way he can communicate in his group home what he wants. People can ask him. For instance, he just went to get his flu shot and at the group home with the nurse and have his blood pressure taken. And the nurse asked him, "How do you feel?" And he typed in happy and pressed the bar and communicated happy. So it allows him to communicate. Now, I'm not saying that he has conversations such as we're having now, or that you can ask him, does your head hurt, or, does something hurt? He's not able to communicate that, but he can certainly tell you that he wants pizza for dinner, or that he doesn't want to go to New York. Yes, he doesn't want to go to New York, So, but it does allow him to communicate at his level.
Because that brings up one of the things that I find, what we're talking about today are ideas, happenings, experiences we've experienced. There's no physical reality. He can deal with, I'm happy, I'm sad, I want pizza. Those are the practical points of his life, and I find that parents don't understand that there's no point talking ideas to their children. They don't get them. They've got a lot of facts, probably more facts than you and I have. They'll tell you everything about a room, and they'll never forget it, whereas you and I forget it all the time. But they will not understand what we're doing right at this very moment.
Well, and Eustacia, you're right on point. When Alex goes out with Barry, Alex is the one who remembers where the car is parked.
Yes.
And, but as far as anything happening yesterday or tomorrow, that is meaningless to him. It's all in the here and now.
Okay. So, you both have interesting ways of how your kids transition from school. Eustacia, you did some very creative things to get Temple from high school into life. And you did the same thing with a child that was very different with Alex. So maybe you could compare notes on that.
Well, for me, first place, I had no trouble with her going away to a boarding school at 14, because I had gone away to a boarding school at 14 and I loved it. So the idea of boarding school seemed to me the most wonderful. I felt about it the way Alex felt about having his own life now in this new home. So, and Temple was thrilled with the idea because it had a farm and horses. It was horses she was crazy about then. So that transition was easy. And the school asked, which seemed to me a fair thing at the time, they said, could we have 1 week without your calling her to make our friendship with her? And I asked Temple, I said, can you manage a week without my calling you? She said yes. And at the end of the week, she loved the school, and the school worked for her. So that transition worked easily. And then the episode that came out in the movie about the ranch in Arizona came through my second husband. She is the sister, or she was, she's not with us, she's left this world. She was the sister of my second husband. And when Ben and I went out to stay with her at a ranch, we looked at each other and said, this is a great place for Temple. So I came home and told Temple, and she said, no, I don't want to go. I want to spend the summer at my school riding horses and taking care of the horses, and that's the life I like. And my feeling is you got to show children, all children, a manual They don't know the world because they haven't experienced the world. So you have to offer them, you have to tempt them with a menu of possibilities. So I said to Temple, I'll make a deal with you. You think you could manage a week out there as you did in school? Yes. And I said, at the end of the week, if you want to come back from Arizona, you can come back. Well, it was a lot easier to travel in those days than now. You could go with your child right up to the gate. And at the other end, I knew Anne would be waiting right at the gate when Temple got off. I could speak to this attendant in the airplane and say, "Could you just make sure my daughter's all right?" So those things operated much more simply and much more easily. And Anne waited for Temple at the other end, at the gate there. So that part was easy. And then after she'd been there a week, she adored it. It was a new life. And she changed from horses to cows. So my point is, got to show your kid a menu. Got to give them something to, well, Temple likes to call it stretching. She says that I stretched her. Oh. And she must like that term because I hear her use it quite a lot.
So, and Renee, you always, and a lot of parents who have children who are lower functioning, you don't want to stretch them. You're fearful to stretch them, which you kept him at home and were probably didn't think a group home would work as well for him, or a house of his own. I hesitate to use the term group home, but his own home.
Think of a better one.
Yeah.
Well, he was getting ready to leave school, and so I had to find a day hab program for him. We knew that, he wasn't able to move into a job per se, and so I had to look around, and he was not able to make a decision as to an appropriate day habilitation program for himself. And so I went to the different fairs that were put on by Baltimore County for that. And I found, and I was told what to ask for, what to ask about, and ended up, despite being told what to ask about, still encountering certain pitfalls. But we did find a good day habilitation program for Alex. I wanted him not to be in a program strictly for autistic individuals, and I wanted him to go out into the community. And so we did find a program that included some vocational skills. It includes physical education. It's at the League for People with Disabilities, where they do have a fitness center and an indoor pool, so he does go swimming once a week. They do physical education, or phys ed. I shouldn't use that term because he's not in school any longer. They work out in the gym every day, and they do life skills where they do cooking. They're out in the community almost every day, as long as the weather is good. And it's proven to be a very, very good program. I encountered a difficulty in the sense of self-determination that I didn't know about, where when you turn 21, this concept of self-determination, that he was able to make his own decisions. And Alex had started at the League, and I had asked, well, how's he doing? And I find out, well, he's not getting on the vans to go to the community outings that they're having. He's staying back and playing with Legos. I said, well, what's the problem? He won't get on the vans. And he was having an issue with the vans. And they told me that it's the self-determination. Because he's 21, he could decide not to go. And nobody had to make him. And I knew that this was the reason I wanted him in this program, was to go out in the community. And that if we could get over this hump of the vans, he would enjoy himself immensely. And so this is where the ABA structure came in very handy. I worked with the folks at the program, I said, look, the vans are there in the morning. They're just in the parking lot. He likes Kit Kats. That's his positive reinforcer. I would like you to put him on the van for a minute, give him a piece of Kit Kat, and work up to a couple minutes, and then drive around the parking lot with the Kit Kat. So we worked on that for, I think, 2 weeks till he was finally comfortable getting on the vans. Needless to say, now he gets on the van, no problem. And that's an example of where the ABA structure with this positive reinforcer as a method of teaching him. And he does very well. There were certain pitfalls about the transportation. I was told to always ask about transportation, and I would get the answer, yes, we provide transportation. I didn't ask, how do you provide transportation? And so
you can't anticipate everything.
Always an important question, you know. I assumed that the league used their own vans. No, they didn't. You know, because you need to find out as a parent, are they going to use mobility? Are they going to use their own vans? How are they going to do this? Because you need to find that out, because some children are going to need to have an aid if it's going to be mobility, if it's not going to be the agency's own vans. So I caution parents who are listening and thinking about this, that transportation, you need to find out exactly how that's being provided. Also, we found out that, you know, these community outings required money. You know, they would go bowling once a week, and so there were a few dollars. You need to find out, are there going to be activities that are going to require a cost outlay? If so, how much? Because, you know, you need to budget for that. It's no longer going to be covered as it was under, you know, the school system. This is out-of-pocket funds. So you need to ask. Also, you know, lunches, breakfast. Does the agency provide them, or do you need to provide them? Is there a cost involved? So I would say that. And then, Chris, you asked about the group homes. We had always anticipated moving Alex into a group home while Barry and I, my husband and Alex's father, were still alive. This was something that we felt very strongly about. We had heard horror stories of parents who kept their child at home, and the child, of course, outliving the parents, child being 50 years old. And it's a horror story to move a child at 50 into a group home. And we wanted to be around. We wanted Alex to move into a group home while we were still around, so that the transition would be seamless. I know that there's many parents out there who, you know, keep their children at home. I know in the state of Maryland, about 50% of the children with autism who leave the educational system do not move on to either a day program or employment. They stay at home with their parents, which is doing a disservice, in my mind, to the child.
I agree with you. I agree, absolutely.
And, you know, I sat on a panel years ago, and it was for a bunch of educators who wanted to ask parents of autistic children, you know, what was it like to be the parent? How did things go at home? And one of the questions was asked, you know, what do you anticipate doing for your child, with your child, as your child gets older? And, you know, we, of course, I said, you know, move him into a group home. Another parent said that she would take her child with her. That's not the right answer.
Ooh.
That is not the right answer.
That's a terrifying answer.
Yes, you know, we are not Siamese twins attached to our autistic children. In our case, the residential placement came a lot sooner than we had anticipated. Alex had an episode where he bolted from the car onto the Baltimore Beltway, and the police were called because we could not restrain him. There was a lot of traffic that day, and it became what is known in Maryland as a crisis situation. And because of that, we were able, depending upon how you look at it, fortunately, unfortunately, to move to the top of the list and move him into a group home. It proved to be a blessing, the best thing, because I believe that it is very important to transition your child to a group home while you are still young enough. Alex, as I talked about earlier, has made the most incredible strides that we never expected. We did go through a transition process where we had transition dinners over at his new home, where he met his two new housemates, and he moved into that home. We expected in June of 2014, we expected a whole summer where we would be picking him up every weekend. The first weekend we went to pick him up, he didn't want to come home. There's this fear.
He loved it.
He loved it.
Mrs. Mike Temple at the school when she first went there. She loved it.
And, there's this fear that these group homes, again, are like mini institutions. And, I must say that we have the most loving caregivers. They take wonderful care of Alex. We are in constant communication with the agency that runs his group home. Whenever we have a concern, we can get on the phone, we email. You see him there. That is, Alex from the group home. He has gained independence.
For weekends or holidays or some occasion where you like all to be together.
And it's been the best. And, Barry and I, for 22 years, had him at home. He comes home for weekends now, and we look at each other and we say, how did we do this for 22 years?
Renee, because you're the lawyer, I do want to know how do you feel about autism and the law? What's your take on that? Where should the law step in? You speak of this incident that you called it a Baltimore a crisis situation.
It's a crisis situation.
Yeah. Well, is that a legal term, or what's the position of autism in the law? Where does the law step in? What can they do? What can they not do? What shouldn't they do?
Well, it's very interesting, Eustacia, you mentioned this because there's a case that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court regarding disabilities and ADA and the police. So, when I called the state trooper, I asked the state trooper, could you just put him in the state trooper, the vehicle, and could we just get a ride home? He's just anxious over all this traffic. And the response was, I'm not a taxi service, ma'am. Now, the taxpayer dollars that were spent in having a state trooper and then 2 Baltimore County vehicles with 4 Baltimore County policemen there and handcuffing him, the taxpayer dollars that were spent are far greater than had that state trooper, and the time involved, had that state trooper simply taken him home in the car.
There's a wonderful man, Michael Teague, who has a son on the spectrum, and he decided that he would get his MA or his PhD, I guess it's a PhD, in helping autistic young, and he would teach off other policemen how to recognize the signs of autism. Because he said what happens is because there are a lot of autistic young who can drive, but they never quite understand stop signs, slow signs. So then the cop, and just like the one you just described, will stop the man, stop the boy. And I saw this in Chris, out where you are, where there's Indian territory. A lot of those Indian kids have been driving trucks on the reservation, or they've been driving those trucks that reap the wheat. That doesn't mean they can drive in traffic. So now you get a kid, and he doesn't understand that he has to stop by the stop sign, and the cop stops him and draws him over. The kid gets nervous, doesn't know how to talk. The cop then thinks he's on drugs. So then he gets worse, and then he said the worst that can happen is the kid reaches into his pocket for some kind of little comfy to touch, a rabbit's foot or whatever it is he uses for comfort, and the cop is sure that he's reaching for a gun. Now he said we have a real problem. He feels that there is a need for the law to understand autism, and certainly the cops who are dealing with traffic on the highway, traffic in a crowded city, need to know more. I just wanted to know. I wanted to know what your reaction is to that.
Well, I know in Maryland, Pathfinders for Autism undertook a huge campaign to educate the various police forces throughout the state on autism. How much of that, there's turnover, and how much of that is retained when the police make a stop? I don't know, and would hesitate to comment. But it's a very challenging issue right now. And,
so it would have been helpful for you had that policeman, if you had been able to say, my son has autism, and there had been a protocol if you run into a parent or a child with autism, that do what the parent asks. If the parent says take the child home and you feel like the child can be maintained by the parent, they seem to be all okay, kind of like a domestic violence thing where everybody seems to be cooling off here, then you would do it. You would follow the lead of the parent. If it looked like the parent really could not handle their child, you would bring the child to a hospital or something like that. But there was no protocol he was following, except we're not a taxi service, ma'am. No, and that didn't help you.
Not at all. Not at all.
So that would be nice if there was just a protocol for people, because this is something that is going to come up more and more.
Well, and as I said,
you had the dealings in court too. I want to hear more about what happens when a situation lands in court. Renee, you're the lawyer. Chris, you're one who presents a case in court for a child.
And I think we're going to need to do this at the next, shall we just say the next one we get together, we're going to bring to be continued, and we'll discuss.
I'd love one where we cover the law.
Okay, and how we could help young adults with autism when they do run into the law, and maybe we can have some great advice for the men in blue. So,
yes. Well, maybe we get Michael Teague. Yes, who does know about it.
So, but it is 11:03, and where I am, it's much later there. And if we could, do you want to summarize all this, Eustacia, and say goodbye to Renee? That would be wonderful.
Gracious, I don't know that I can summarize it any more than I can summarize my life, or Renee can summarize hers. But I found it wonderfully informative to hear what you have to say, and I love the fact that you just took hold of the situation at every turn yourself. And we have to do more of that. That I believe in. We cannot rely on the professionalizing of autism, which is what happens. And the professionals can't see into your particular family. They're going to do the best they can from where they sit. We have to put it all together. We have to share our insight. So thank you, Renee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eustacia.